Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Wendy Mitchell. I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm a journalist and a film festival consultant and a big lover of Nordic cinema. So I'm thrilled to be hosting. As some of you know, I'm watching people coming into the room now. Thank you for, it's a big crowd coming today. And it's wonderful to see some names I recognize from the first two audiences. So it's great that some of you are joining us for all of these. And a reminder, next week, you'll be able to catch up on the ones you missed on YouTube and Facebook. So look out for those if you've missed any. This is our third webinar out of 5. They're organized on behalf of Scandinavian Films, which is the umbrella group for the 5 Nordic film institutes. So please do join us tomorrow. We're doing one on genre films, and Friday, one on making your first feature. So I hope that'll be of interest to you. But of course, you're really interested in today's topic, which is reaching audiences in 2020 and beyond. And I do think the and beyond is an important note. Obviously, we know 2020 has just been crazy, especially for cinemas. Well, especially for everybody on the planet, I guess. But, you know, we know cinemas have been so hugely impacted, and as a result, VOD has been hugely impacted. We're learning some lessons now as things start to open up again. And as some of you will know, some of the Nordic countries never fully shut down, or they're reopening a little bit quicker than some of the rest of the world. So I think they'll have some lessons for us that'll be good for the rest of the year. And also maybe things we're going to learn that can be of use later in many years to come. So I would also just like to remind everybody, we have the Q&A button open. So if you have a question, feel free to ask a question at any time. You don't have to wait till the end, and we'll get to them as we have time to ask our expert speakers. So without further ado, I wanted to welcome 6 amazing speakers that we have with us today, and apologies in advance for my usual Scandinavian/American/fake British pronunciation of your names. So we're joined by Ditte Daugbjerg Christensen, who is Managing Director at Ost for Paradis in Aarhus, Denmark. We have Peter Fornstam, who is CEO of the Swedish cinema chain Svenska Bio. We have Truls Foss, who is Head of Program Cinema at Vega in Norway. We have Jonas Holmberg, who is Artistic Director at the Göteborg Film Festival in Sweden, and also helping with their VOD platform, Draken. We have Mika Sitala, who is CEO of Cinema Mondo in Finland. And last but not least, we have Hrönn, Sveinsdóttir, who is Managing Director of Paradis in Iceland. Welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we're actually going to start with Hrönn. We're starting with Hrönn because she's got an especially strange situation, not just COVID, but there's been some real estate disputes going on in Iceland for the lovely and amazing Paradis, which is the only art house cinema in Iceland. It's an amazing venue. Hrönn, do you want to just tell us, I guess, quite quickly what's going on and when you think the cinema can reopen and where?
Hi, Wendy. Thank you for having me at the webinar. Yeah, it has been a strange situation. We knew that this time was coming. We weren't getting along with our landlord, to say the least. No, but we also needed like more support as far as renovation. The building is completely run down. We cannot operate in such a bad facilities. So we have been steadfastly pushing for new contracts, and then we don't get a response until we say, okay, that's it, we're closing, because we had to. That was the only thing we could do. Ironically, we were really busy before the COVID because of that. People knew that we might be closing for good, and our attendance at our cinema went up like almost 100% for the month of February. It's the largest month we've ever had since we started 10 years ago. So I'm like really hopeful that we'll get these contracts and that we will renovate in the summer. And before we close in May, we will have this big turnout, and then the COVID comes. Of course, like nobody in the world ever. I would have been less surprised if aliens would have landed. Really, you've seen that in movies. So it was a big dent in all our plans, and then of course focus shifts from us to the problem. So it has dragged on. We shut down in March 24th because of regulations on gatherings, and we haven't opened since. But I'm happy to say that we are staying here. We are just finishing our contracts with the city and the state. I haven't announced anything publicly because once you haven't signed anything, you're jinxing it, right? But we're days away from being able to tell everyone what the deal is, and we'll stay in this building, and we'll hopefully, well, a part of the plan is that we'll renovate.
That is such wonderful news. I am really glad to hear that. While you're shut, either because of COVID or you're going to be shut for renovations, what can you do to stay in touch with your usual audience? Do you do lots of social media? Do you send them newsletters to recommend films on VOD or anything like that?
We have been staying in touch. We have a very loyal fan base. And of course, that fan base sort of got even more enthusiastic in light of the news that we might be just gone for good. So there have been support meetings here before the pandemic, but then as we were forced to completely shut down, we communicate a lot through social media. Our mail list, our email list, which is quite old-fashioned, but that's how a lot of our older audience also is involved. It grew by 1,000 people because of a few things. We were a part of the Europa Cinemas movie outreach. People responded really well to that. Mubi told us that we had one of the higher response rates of any country, maybe because the whole thing is new here and people thought it was so great. And of course it was like, get Bio Paradis into your living room. They think, oh yeah, this is great. And then we are constantly, regularly reminding people of our huge catalog of films that we have distributed in Iceland by highlighting the VOD film of the week, reminding people of films they missed. And that has also gotten a good response. They are on the local VOD platforms, and people seem to respond to that as well.
That's great. And Iceland has opened up. Iceland has a smaller population, was able to amazingly track and trace the virus and infected people in a way that other countries have not managed, and has done a really great job of getting back to normal. So multiplexes are open. Do you know how cinema going is? Have you been to the cinema in Iceland?
Unfortunately, I have not. And unfortunately, only 4 out of the 7 cinemas, including us, we are one of the 3 that are still remaining shut, but 2 other cinemas remain shut, multiplexes. And the cinemas in the country are still shut. And the reason is that they don't have anything to screen. So if you look at the box office list, it's there's a local film that has been sitting at the top for weeks before COVID.
The fishing trip.
The last fishing trip. Now it's going to 26,000, which is amazing for this country. But the rest of the list is like reissues of The Shining, Batman Forever, just the Inception, all sorts of random stuff. Even the Lego Batman movie is back. So there isn't much to screen. And I think cinemas are struggling with that. And also before the pandemic, the turnout of the week of March 6th, before when we were starting to detect the first contagion, but nothing had really happened. We had like 15,000 people going to the cinema, and the box office was 41 million, and now we have 21, excuse me, and now since these cinemas and all restraints have been lifted now of gatherings, or you can have 200 people, we only see 3,000 this week and 4.5 in box office, so the drop is huge.
Yeah, and we should mention that's Icelandic kroner, I guess.
That's Icelandic
dollars.
Lego dollars.
Okay, I think some of the other speakers are going to really understand that conundrum of you can reopen, but you don't have any big new films. So thank you, Hrönn, and we'll come back to you during the question time. I'd like to go to Finland with Mika. And I think Mika has shared with me on email that there's some good news, and cinemas are reopening. And how is it going, Mika?
This is the day of reopening in a bigger scale in Finland, so this is a very good day. A handful of indie cinemas have been open since start of the month, but just a handful. And obviously we have this Midsummer Madness big in Finland, so last weekend is just symbolic.
And what films are you putting out? And do you need Tenet to really get things started?
Well, we need to wait another month, but there's been a local movie on top, a movie that started just when everything closed down. We are bringing back Japanese animation, Weathering with You. It was the biggest anime in Japan last year, and it had a great start. 3,500 admissions in a couple of days before the shutdown, just immediately closed down everything here. So it looks like it has strong legs, as an example. So there's going to be older movies. We are opening our crown jewel outdoor cinema this Friday. We started ticket sales Monday, and since we are insanely commercial, we are starting with a movie by a Saudi Arabian woman, Perfect Candidate. We are always at the high point of the commercial business. We call it Mariam, but it's known as Perfect Candidate. And we immediately sold out several days. And from main chain Finkino, the other end of the scope, we hear that for today, there's 3 cinemas, big cinemas, multiplexes opening today. And this morning they had 800 tickets sold. And for a test period, we could call it test period of 2 weeks, they at the moment have like 2.5, less than 3,000 admissions, which is, let's say, less than half of usual when people come back from Midsummer Madness. But also the programming is less than half of usual. We have older movies, and like we hear from Iceland, some comebacks, classics. But the vibe is good. Tickets are moving, and there's good word on the street. Our main enemy at the moment, I love sun, but it's a big problem for multiplexes. We have Cannes weather, plus 27 outdoors. As you can see from my face, I've been on the sea a lot.
Yes. Need some rain.
Garden is happy with rain, but people are happy with sun. So I would guess it's a educated guess that the early start will be half of usual at this point or less, and every week it will go fast toward quite normal midsummer, when everything depends a lot on weather. In our case, in our example, we are opening with Saudi Arabian woman story, then Saint Maud, a little bit nasty horror thing. We bring documentary of Hilma af Klint. I mean, we are loading the summer as usual, like different style Japanese anime there. We try to cover the corners that the studios are sort of not covering.
Okay,
I think
need
it will
that.
be
Audiences
good.
need that. Yeah.
Yeah, it will be good in when August comes. It seems it should be normal here. Then
And
people
in
are
the
back from
cinemas-
holidays.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I had that Zoom lag. In the cinemas now, do you have to social distance? And if so, you know, did you have to put up new like plastic screens for anybody? And has it cost you any money to get the cinemas ready to reopen?
Well, it costs money to make the new seating plans for pre-sales. For instance, in our Kino Engel, if an individual customer buys one ticket, so the system now blocks seat on the left and seat on the right. And in the outdoor cinema, we cut capacity, and there people sit outdoors by a table and two by a table. So these two don't have distance, but then the tables are wide apart. We are installing usual things that you see in shops, you know, the screens and lot of hand cleaning and wiping of this and that. So obviously it is generating some cost, but it's also, I think, really necessary to build on the feeling that it's okay to go back. Movies are back.
Sounds like with those ticket sales you mentioned, yeah, they're not huge, but I think they show a willingness from the audience that there's an appetite.
Absolutely, absolutely. This weather is really amazing for us. So let's say this was a normal situation, so cinemas would be rather quiet. So in this very situation, Finland is not looking bad at all. Schools reopened 1 month ago, and by now kids are on holiday, but there was no spike in cases, nothing. And then restaurants were opened, and recently regulation is easing up on all fronts. So everything is building towards, yeah, let's go, let's do fun, enjoy life, like we used.
That's good to hear.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Mika. We'll come back to you at the end when we do some questions.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to Norway with Truls, and just to hear what the current situation is in Norway, and how has Vega responded, and what do you hope for the rest of the summer?
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me here at the webinar. We were totally closed down at the 12th of March, and were locked down for a couple of months, and opened up on the 7th of May, and with quite strict restrictions. Of course, the washing of the hands and so on and all that, 2 seats between everyone. And that was quite good. It opened super nice, with sold out the first weekend, opened quite softly with only 4 days, from Thursday till Sunday. And then on the 15th of June, we opened a bit more with 1 more day, because then it could be go from 50 people in the screening hall to 200. And first of all, with only 1 seat between the groups and the people in the screening hall, but then it's gone now back to 2 seats. So I would say it goes well, but it's sort of like the same thing as Finland. The weather is way too nice. It's like 30 degrees. Yeah, it's Cannes vibes, but not with the films that premieres in Cannes. But it's I would say it's gone surprisingly well, seen with the weather, and it's been, when it comes to programming, we have the same problem as well. We have to pick up things that was in February, January, so on, like Parasite, Lighthouse, Waves, and the smaller titles, and try to combine that with more creative approach. Of course, more imported films that is not in Norwegian distribution, but also collaborations with short film, with smaller Norwegian films, with we don't have any, had any special events before, like on 15th of June, but before that we had like video interviews and video talks. We had a premiere of Roy Andersen's About Endlessness, which was with a video interview, which lasted for 30 minutes afterwards, which was a super nice.
Was that with Roy himself, or?
Yeah, with Roy himself. Because we were supposed to have it before the lockdown, and Roy first wanted to come, and then he didn't want to come, and that was sort of lucky, because the day we had to close down, that was the day of the big premiere we're going to have. And before that, they ended up agreeing on having a video interview instead. So instead of having like a premiere screening, we just screen it after every screening of the film. And that's been, I would say, quite a success. We're taking everything in with the circumstances and so on into account.
I mean, how, you don't have to get into figures, or we're happy to hear them, but how financially is the company going to cope with selling less tickets and maybe having more cleaning staff, and, you know, the economics aren't as good as, you know, it's a tough business anyway.
Yeah. We're like a cultural house. We also have a theater downstairs. We have 3 screening halls and a theater. We're getting support from the state, like compensation funding for the lost ticket income. And without that, it wouldn't have worked, because you could have 50 people in one screening hall, and you don't have the big titles. You have to think creatively around the smaller things and local collaborations and so on. So without that funding, it would have been impossible, I think. Luckily, I'm mostly sitting with boss. We also, of course, work on that together. And yeah, we're happy that we get some compensation.
Great. I think your video was breaking up a little bit, but I think we heard everything you said, so not a big problem. Has Vega thought about doing anything? You know, Mika was mentioning a big outdoor screening. Have you done anything like that, or drive-in, or anything?
We had in Oslo, the big screening cinema chains, like for example Nordic Film Kino, and also one of the smaller ones, Hrönn Kino. And Odeon Kino collaborated with Nordic Film Kino, like super huge outdoor. And we're in an illogical place close to the city. We ended up instead. Do you hear me?
You're cutting in and out a bit.
Cutting in and out. When did I cut out now?
Well, I keep hearing a few words, but you were talking about some others have made outdoor screenings, I think.
Yeah, the bigger screening, like the bigger cinema chains have made like massive super drive-ins with a lot of cars. And we're in the middle of the city, like super urban. So it's not really logical for us to travel outside of our like local area to arrange something like that. But we did the movie collaboration with Europa Cinemas, which was quite successful. And also just doing like small things, a lot of social media, keeping in touch with our audiences, and doing also a lot of now direct contact with our audience afterwards. But we didn't go on the drive-in cinema or outdoor cinema. It would have been, yeah.
I think what a lot of people, you know, say, oh, let's do a drive-in, and it's hugely expensive to get it right and sounding right, and
a lot of coordination.
Yeah.
Also, with the smaller films, how many people can you pull when the bigger chains have like the more commercial films? And also like they used a area called Telenor Area to have it indoors, so then you have sort of like better quality than outdoor cinema. And yeah, and to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of outdoor cinema. I'm quite a purist when it comes to that. I like to sit inside. But also we talked about doing different digital stuff, but also we sort of like the response you could see all over, because it was such a, let's call it a digital fever. It took like a couple of weeks, and then people were sort of tired about that. They wanted to come back physical. So instead of doing that, we planned the reopening and what sort of things we could do with that.
Great, thank you. We'll come back when we open up some more questions, and your audio was sounding better at the end, so that was good. I'll go to Denmark now with Ditte. Can you tell us, you know, what's going on at your cinema and on the distribution side, and, you know, is the audience feeling confident yet to come back?
I think they are actually. quite feeling confident and feeling it's okay and it's safe to return. We have the same problems that has already been mentioned. Our cinema has been open for 4 weeks now, and before that we were closed in almost 3 months, as was all of the other Danish cinemas. And so we opened with a mix of new and old titles, and all the same restrictions as mentioned before. But it's really only one title that where we can feel these restrictions having an impact, and that's the American title Little Women, that went on 2 weeks ago, and I'm pretty sure that we could have sold twice as many tickets in the first week if we had normal situation. So that was a proof to us that when the right film is there, the audiences they are not afraid to come.
And what's it been like for you, financially and logistically, to put social distancing and hygiene measures, or to hire more cleaning staff? Are you going to survive this?
We are going to survive. Luckily, yes, we are, because like Truls said, in Norway, we have great support from the government. Yeah, so but it does require a lot, new routines and stuff, but everybody has been very happy to return. The audience that came the first day were really, we're so happy that you're back open. So yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, and I guess, there the culture is not so much to wear masks or anything, so nobody's really wearing masks. So. No. And in our distribution, we took the opportunity to try something we've never done before, to release a movie directly on streaming, a German title called Aren't You Happy? Das melancholische Mädchen. A very small title, but we tried it, and it was good. It got a lot of good reactions, and we were all alone with this one message in all our social media from both our cinema and our distribution: just check out this new title on VOD. So we definitely had a lot of feedback on it, but even though it was a fun experience for us, and it was definitely good to just do something in this period, we are not, we don't waver. It's the theatrical release, that's the way for us. And with that VOD release, is that something you did on your own, or did you partner with existing VOD platforms? Yeah,
we have a partner, and they are pushing the films out to regular platforms. So we did get lost in the stream of major titles, I'm sure.
So even when you were in lockdown, I thought it was interesting to hear that you have something called Angels, I think.
Yes.
Can you tell us about connecting with your audience and the Angels?
Yeah, we were in this period, we were very much reminded how lucky we are to have a very strong relationship with our audience. I think it was in 2005 we were truly an endangered cinematic species, very close to just closing altogether. And we had 4 regular customers coming up saying to us, we've talked about this, we would like to help, how can we do something, we don't want you to close. And to just cut it really short, they founded this entity called the Angels of Paradis, where people buy a share in their entity for 500 Danish crown, that's roughly 65 euros. They buy this small part of Paradis, and then the money goes to support us, and we were able to rebuild things and remodel, invest in new technology and so on. And in this period, they have really done an amazing job reaching out to all of the audience in Denmark, actually, saying you can help Øst for Paradis in this strange and difficult time by buying a share. And over 300 have done that in those 3 months. That's roughly 20,000 euros that they now have, and they can invest in a project of ours in the year to come. So it's really, I think our audience have a very strong connection with us. Some feel they have a personal relationship and having this very concrete proof that it's not just us who misses going back to work. They really miss us. We do make a difference, and that means a lot. They have been very important for us, both economically, of course, but also morally and politically.
And are most of those angels, are they living in Aarhus and they come to the cinema, or they might be anywhere and know you as a distributor?
They are. It's not actually in our distribution company is totally apart from this. It's just the cinema.
This is just the cinema. Sorry.
So naturally,
there are house people. Yeah.
Not naturally. It's primary in our own town, but we have supporters from Copenhagen and from the rest of Denmark and from Iceland and Greenland. So we're definitely, we have support, really big support.
Great. So if anybody wants to be an angel here.
Yeah, please be.
Thank you, Ditte. We're now going to go to Sweden. We have our two speakers from Sweden. I'm going to start with Peter Fornstam, who I think never totally shut down. He's one of the COVID heroes. You know, Sweden as a country never 100% shut down. But how did you connect with audiences? Obviously, there weren't, there were some points where you didn't have full normal programming going on. So how have you been tackling this, Peter?
Well, we stayed open. Filmstaden, which is the big chain, they closed mid-March. We stayed open another month over Easter, basically. And then one of our managers created something called the Cinema on Demand, Video on Demand, which meant that you could rent your own screen and take one of the movies that we had in the inventory from the server. And there was a minimum of 8 persons could attend, up to 50, which is the temporary limit here. And that spread through social media and through all our theaters. And after a while, our marketing department sort of created posters with taglines like, it's not game over, because here you can play your video games, or you were only an email away. And we've done over 2,000 of those events around Sweden where people rented their own screen.
That is just amazing. And how much did that cost, roughly? They weren't super expensive, was it?
The cost was for a minimum of 8 movie tickets. And there was one funny story. Gothenburg, everything closed down and we have no screens there. So we have a theater in the city of Borås. There was one woman 4 Saturdays in a row rented a screen she liked in this from us and came over. And one weekend she was there was only 2 people and she paid 8 tickets because she loved going to the movies. So that's the way we stayed connected and kept our staff motivated, kept the theater sort of semi-open and stayed on as a player in the society, which we felt was key here.
And are you getting support from the Swedish government through a tough time? Yeah. Yes,
we've got, besides the furloughing cost, we could, we got sort of a rent package where we could negotiate with the landlords, we could pay half the rent for Q2. And we also got some money from the Swedish Film Institute. I also doubled up as chairman for the Swedish Exhibitors Association. And basically, we got about $3 per non-sold ticket between mid-March to end of May compared to the same period in 2019. But there was a cap on 10 million Swedish crowns that kicked in on my circuit and on Filmstaden. But still, we got some money, yes.
Yeah, that sounds like it helps for sure.
Yes.
What's the situation now? Are you open? Is there any social distancing? I mean, can you sell every ticket if you want to? And how are things going right now?
Well, first of all, our theater in Stockholm has never closed. So Victoria in Stockholm has stayed open all the way through. And Grand just closed for a couple of weeks that they always do during the summer. There's a cap at 50 people max in the theater. And it's a little hard to understand why, because there could be 200 in the restaurant as long as there's social distancing. We have basically to keep 50, 60 centimeters between one group of customers to the next. Okay. And we have dynamic seating, so we can do that. But for us, a concern is, of course, when they're going to lift the 50 people to, let's say, like Norway 200 or Denmark or whatever. But there is a restriction there. Yeah.
Any idea when that might get better?
Well, listen, how should I say this? I don't think that we have been as successful as our Nordic neighbors in terms of keeping COVID out of the game here as a territory. So my guess is that they said it's going to stay over the summer, but this could change tomorrow. We don't know. There was a big thing about the amusement parks, where yesterday they were told not to open the amusement parks this summer. So I think that indicates that they will be a little slower lifting those restrictions until they feel that the rates goes down.
Okay. And in terms of programming, some of your colleagues here have, spoken about, there's a lack of big new product coming in. Yeah. What do you have on screen, and what's working, and what do you hope can come through soon?
Well, listen, tonight, first of all, we have basically library products, stuff that played until mid-March when the closing come, and then a couple of movies like Marie Curie and stuff like that has opened all of this, which opens tonight, as a matter of fact. So I think we are today. The Filmstaden is opening 4 cities, 4 multiplexes around Sweden, and they slowly but surely starting reopening their circuit. And I think that's a signal to the marketplace the cinemas are open again. But they have to survive on classic or library titles, and I think the whole industry is sitting here waiting for the Walt Disney Company to decide whether they're going to go with Mulan the 22nd of July or not. And I think that hopefully that's going to happen, and then we will sort of bring all our theaters back on mid-July to prepare, have a ramp-up week for that. And I think we need that kind of movie to sort of bring the audience back. But I'm very encouraged by my colleagues in Denmark and Norway, because it seems that once they reopened, people came back to the movies. Great.
So good luck in the coming weeks, and we're hopeful for July. I'm going to go elsewhere in Sweden to Jonas Holmberg, who is the artistic director of the Göteborg Film Festival, and also working with the VOD platform Draken, which has been very active during the pandemic, quite early, and not just active for themselves, but trying to help some cinemas. So I guess, Jonas, first of all, can you tell us about the VOD side of things and what Draken has been doing and what's been working well?
Yeah, thanks for having me at the webinar. And yeah, Draken is the subscription VOD platform that we have been running since 2014. And it is now the leading VOD platform for art house cinema in Sweden. And when the pandemic hit, we noticed, of course, that it was a big threat to the cinemas, and the revenue went away outside the window. But we also noticed that we had also a big increase in new subscriptions. And basically, when we talked to our friends running cinemas, there was a very big correlation between those two. Like the augmentation of our figures was the same percentage as what went away from the cinema. So we found out that there was like the interest for watching art house films was the same, but the audience went elsewhere. And since we love cinemas, we thought like everybody was screaming for what can we do, and we thought, how can we help? And so then we started this initiative where new subscribers could choose their local cinema, and half the revenue would go of their subscription would go to that cinema for 6 months. This was, and in combination with that, we also launched several new films that just had been released or were about to be released on cinemas. So it was a very attractive programming during this period. And this was very successful and attracted a lot of people to sign up for Draken. And we have now 3 times the subscription base that we had before the pandemic. And so even though this initiative also created a lot of interest, both internationally and nationally, because it was, I think now there are similar initiatives all over the world, but I think we were the first one out, which made it interesting for people, and that created a lot of attention for the service. And since we don't have a big marketing budget, this was also crucial for us to get this attention from the movie-loving audience. And even though we started this as kind of we wanted to help out, it was very spontaneous. Actually, we came up with the idea one day, and the next day we were online with this. We have found out that this has been very good for not only the cinemas, but now we have now reached a number of 60,000 euros that has been going to the cinemas, which I'm very proud of. And for some of there are 100 cinemas attached to the program, and some of them have only received very little money, but some of them, the cinemas that have a strong digital relationship to their audience, they have been able to attract lots of money actually for their cinema. And also this has been a way to keep communicating with their audience and to stay relevant to their audience by giving special curations for their cinema and their favorite films, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to you, because it feels like it was one of the first initiatives that was announced like the day we started lockdown or something. It was very quick. And you're right, there are some, in the US has followed suit, and I think Modern Films in the UK shares some profits with some exhibitors. But yeah, for sure, I think you were the first people to implement this idea. And I'm also curious, it's wonderful to see people collaborating in hard times. Do you think, maybe the collaboration won't be quite the same once cinemas are all reopened, but do you see benefits to keeping this partnership with all these cinemas going in 2024, 2025? Do you think it'll still be going?
Yes, definitely. Not in this way, of course, but I think the big advantage for us in the long term is that we now have relationships to cinema and cinema owners all across Sweden. Before we mostly knew local cinema owners and maybe the ones in Stockholm, etc. But now we know everybody and have like business relationships to more than 100 cinemas across Sweden. And I believe that there are many people talking about the conflict between streaming and the cinema sector now, but I think especially for the art market, the key is collaboration in this field. And I think both for the good of cinema and for our own business and for our own mission, we will do this more. And we are currently discussing on or working on a project that will aim to first help the cinemas to re-attract audience when they open on a bigger scale in the autumn, but also to try out new business models in the intersection between cinemas and streaming, which I think is the future. Cinemas and streaming and festivals is if we are active on all those three fields, we can build interesting things, I think, because then we also have a relationship to the audience on these three platforms.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of thinking. And you mentioned festivals. I know it's not fair to ask you because it's only June. Do you think Göteborg will exist as a physical festival? I mean, you get huge audiences locally and people coming in. If you had to predict now, what do you think will happen in January?
We are planning a physical festival, yes. Then of course we don't know, but we are planning a physical festival, but with lots of restrictions and safety measures, and maybe not at full scale of a normal festival year in terms of how many people can be in the cinema and how many overseas guests we will host and be able to welcome. But we are planning on arranging a physical festival. But then of course it's too soon to talk about details of how this will be, because it all has to do with how the pandemic evolves.
Yeah. I'll come even if I have to quarantine. So I'll be there. We're getting some great questions in that I think would be good to open up to the whole panel. So thanks to the audience for the questions so far, and please keep them coming. We have a few more minutes. I think one important one I want to start with is because it's something I wanted to ask about, is about windowing and, you know, theatrical windows. Are you more open during this time to day and date releasing? Do you think once cinemas are fully booming again, that day and date releasing is going to be more problematic for some films? Obviously, there is a difference between a Marvel film and a, you know, local Swedish Christmas drama. But yeah, what are your thoughts on windows right now and what could be coming up?
Who asked the question?
Who asked? No.
Well, it's Peter.
It was an anonymous question. Who wants to answer? Peter.
I can answer the question. I can start asking my answer. I think that special times need special measures. I know that some of the smaller distributors has asked us to waive the windows during the corona, and we said, fine, everyone has to survive. But we also said that this is sort of a corona decision, and once corona sort of we go back to normal, we're going to go back to where we were in terms of windowing. So that's my take, that once things start to reestablish, we go back to the way we used to do business before. So you know, the windows has always been under pressure. It will continue to be so, but we will continue to hold our position on that. Everyone chases exclusivity, but since we are first in line, we want to maintain our exclusivity.
Anybody else want to chime in? Mika, please.
Yeah, I fully agree with neighbors. There was a lot of demand for all sort of inventions during these months. But we go back to normal, like back to proper windowing in Finland, I believe, in a couple of months.
Okay.
And
you're
what
happy
happened?
with that, I guess.
What happened between will be shared in stories once we can share wine and bad jokes face to face again. Hopefully soon.
Okay. There's a question just straight for Ditte, which is how old do you think the Angels are? What are the age groups of people supporting that? Do you know?
I think it was originally 50 plus, like senior citizens having these 500 Danish crowns to spare more easily than, say, a student. But we made, I think, about a year and a half, we had three local artists make three works of art, especially for us and for this purpose. And now when you buy a stock, you get this very high quality art print with it. And that has made it more convenient for people to give to, like, a new student or at a wedding or something. So I'm actually, I think it's broadening now.
Great. Has anybody else been noticing things about older audiences versus younger audiences in this time? We obviously know that, you know, for some older audiences are also higher risk. You know, if you're elderly, you might be in a high risk group and you don't want to go anywhere, much less to the cinema. But maybe younger people are more keen to go to the cinema to see an art house film now that things are reopening. Any thoughts on age ranges, or even on VOD, Jonas, if you?
Yeah, we have noticed that we have more weird questions to our VOD support about how to start a computer and these kind of things from maybe an age group, an older age group that hasn't been convenient in using VOD services before, but now desperately wants to see new art house films.
Great. And can anybody tell me what you think? You know, we've mentioned a few examples of some films that have worked well, but, you know, Jonas, on Draken VOD, what have been some of the films that have been doing well? I'm just curious if they're sort of like feel-good films. Are they more sort of Nordic? Are they English language? Do you see any pattern in what people are watching?
People have been very interested in the new films, of course, and the biggest hit of the spring has been Portrait of a Lady on Fire, a cinema film that has been watched a lot and was a big success. But also, for example, A White White Day by Hilton Kalmarsson for a Nordic title has also been watched a lot. Actually, when you do good programming ideas, the audience follows suit in quite a good manner. Yeah.
I'm just hearing a comment from Christian Flores, who's tuning in, who said he did a Nordic showcase in Mexico and the audience was very diverse and eclectic. So that's good to hear. Ditte, did you want to say about your audience?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that a colleague of mine in Copenhagen had the idea as the first, and many movie theaters followed since, to show the documentary about James Baldwin called "I'm Not Your Negro," in the light of what has happened in the United States, and that has been a very big success. So I think a lot of cinemas have had an unusual creativity, and the audience are ready to follow. So yeah.
Mika.
Yeah, another example, we are bringing back Moonlight, a huge success for us here. And in the light of the recent, like mentioned, horrifying news, we sold out first upcoming screening in outdoors immediately, and we are building up on that. So there's different motivations right now from usual. We never went back from this kind of situation. People have different motivations behind their decisions now. We're gonna find out when it's a no-brainer to think that young people go first. So we have an animated title and a horror movie, but we also have Perfect Candidate. So it's gonna be a measuring stick. Will the usual audience that could be expected for this, will they show up? Or is it only feminists of 20 years age group?
Yeah. Truls, what about you? Have you been noticing the age ranges?
I would say we usually have quite a young audience, around like 20 to 40. We also, by the way, screening I'm Not Your Negro and also a documentary called Concerning Violence. And we're closed in July, but our last film for the season is Do the Right Thing. And because of the situation that's happening again, it's been massive, like really good numbers on these screenings. But yeah, with age, we see that on About Endlessness. It's mostly the old hardcore art cinema goers from back in the days. And on the I'm Not Your Negro, it's younger audience. It really depends on the film, and I think everyone is actually about to come back. There was an interesting research from Denmark, Ditte, that I read that 90% of the elders in Denmark were ready to go back to cinemas for like a month ago, and that they weren't afraid of COVID-19.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. We've been isolating my mother-in-law, who's in a high-risk group, has asthma and bad lungs, and at the end she just said, "If I don't die from COVID-19, I will die of loneliness." And I think a lot of people have reached this conclusion. Mm-hmm. Still, we have to take care, and we have to take care of the audience that comes to us. But I was surprised myself seeing that our first customer, on the very first day we stood there, I think 11 people ready to be all responsible and cleaning everything. And the first one was my mother's age, and she was just, we said, "Oh, thank you for coming," and she said, "No, thank you. I have really missed you."
Oh, that's lovely. And Hrönn, you mentioned things were booming back in February at Paradis. Anytime I've been there, it seems like quite a cool, funky, young audience. But what is your audience range usually?
Well, we are the only art house, so our audience traditionally has been older, more female than male, but we've been managed to change that. We have actually attracted younger people more from the 20 plus, you know, to 40s, but our most loyal group are the arty, cultural 50 something, 60, 70 something year olds. These people are going to come here in droves when we reopen. I mean, hopefully, of course, all of them.
Yeah.
But the older people are, I think, more in dire need of their art house right now.
Yeah. We've got a lot of good questions coming in, but I think we only have time for one more. But I think it's quite an interesting question. It's just about screening national films versus, you know, bigger international or Hollywood films, especially, you know, when things are back to normal and you have Mulan coming in. Do each of you have a commitment sort of officially to screen local product, or you do that sort of a case-by-case basis? There's no quota to hit or anything, but how do you make sure, especially if there becomes this huge deluge of big films, that the little films don't get lost in that shuffle? Anyone?
I can take that one.
Peter, why don't you start?
Okay. You know, all the release schedules are so moved around, so it's very difficult to get a clear view. But I think because the whole backlog has been used up, I think there's a huge demand for new movies, big or small. So I don't worry. I really think the other way around. I think with the changes of the release schedule, I think there are slots opening up for smaller movies that might not been available before. So I think I don't worry for the small independent distributors. I worried for them during COVID, but I don't worry. The ones that survived and can reopen, there's going to be room for them to play their movies.
Mika?
Yeah, I also see some healthy developments. In my mind, I think movies that were not really necessary to anyone, like Trolls or Artemis Fowl, it's healthy for theaters that thank God they went straight to VOD. Thank you for this. And the gap maybe is widening. There will be Mulan and Tenet, and then there will be our kind of art house movies. It was the middle ground that was suffering earlier already, maybe because of the quality problems. So maybe this will, like Peter wisely said, maybe this will open up a bit more seats, actually, for art house or quality or international, however you call it.
Great, more local films, less Trolls. Is that going to be the case in Denmark, Ditte?
I really don't know. I think it's so unpredictable where the successes are coming from. We have a commitment to show a lot of European films, so naturally we'll continue doing that. But I don't see we're not gonna do something specifically for Danish films. We're gonna show them as we have always done, but we have 7 screening rooms, so we're gonna find place for all the films.
Okay, great. Jonas, what about on VOD? What percentage of your films are Swedish or Nordic? Do you know?
Oh, that I don't know. I think we actually would like to have a bigger Nordic catalog than we have, since our hearts are beating for Nordic film and to support Nordic filmmakers. But due to right situation, sometimes it's easier to have a strong international lineup on the VOD market.
Great. And Trolls?
We have sort of like, we have a commitment that we have to have a certain percentage of not English language film, but we also have, which is not that defined, but we have to have a commitment to Norwegian film. And the bigger productions in Norway doesn't go that well at Vega, but this has been quite a good period for working with the smaller titles. We have a documentary called I, Human, and also a small, really narrow art film called We Are Here Now that we worked with like special events, talks, doing sort of like alternative distribution, not distribution, but launching, and also the short film with like selling of tickets to a short film with a talk around it. And I sort of like, I think we managed to get more hype because of the situation now around these sort of screenings, and people get more, open their eyes a bit more to the smaller films, not just the bigger Norwegian films. And I just want to give a shout out to Jonas and Drake Film. It's a super good VOD platform, and I loved Smackens, and everyone should see it.
Okay, cool. There's a plug. I think we're going to have to wrap on time. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the audience questions, but it's been great seeing so many people joining us. As I said, this talk will be archived and it'll be available by next week on YouTube and Facebook, I believe. Yeah, I really want to thank our panelists for joining us today, but also for, 2020 is not an easy year for anybody, and you've been doing work, not forgetting, not leaving behind filmmakers and not leaving behind audiences. And I think that is really important. So please keep fighting the good fight to connect these amazing films to audiences. Just a reminder, again, we have 2 more webinars this week from Scandinavian Films. Tomorrow is about genre films, and Friday is about getting your first feature made. So please join us again. And thanks again to everybody who joined us today, and especially to our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.